None of that's normal.
Like, I don't.
Well, I'm trying to say to you, Bub, is back in the day.
No, I know you keep saying that.
Back in the day,
but even today,
it was socially accepted. That's what nobody's talking about.
What was socially accepted?
What was socially
Girls
accepted?
being in a club?
Brian Callen's having a moment right now. This is the kind where you drop one podcast episode, watch the internet light it on fire, and then, instead of just letting it burn down, come back a week later to explain yourself. Slower, with more feeling, maybe even a tear. Now look, everybody in the ecosystem eventually says something that ages like unrefrigerated mayonnaise. Rogan's done it. Schaub's done it. That's just the tax for talking 3 hours a day, 4 days a week, with zero editor and zero filter. But every so often, somebody doesn't just pay the tax, they become the reason it exists. That's Bryan Callen right now. 59, 4 specials deep, a long-running Rogan-adjacent podcast with a sizable audience. And somehow, in 2026, he wound up sounding like he was defending powerful men in Epstein's orbit. And a lot of viewers called him a Epstein defender apologist for it. So let's do the full autopsy. How he got here, why the timing makes this so much worse than it should be, and why, out of everybody in this scene who said something dumb about Epstein, Callen might be the single worst positioned guy on earth to have tried it. Quick refresher for anyone who wandered in from a Joe Rogan clip and has no idea who this guy is. Bryan Callen's been around forever. Original Mad TV cast member in the 90s. The guy from Old School and both Hangover movies. Coach Mella on the Goldbergs and schooled for the better part of a decade. Legitimate working actor resume. The guy who shows up in something and you've definitely seen and you go, oh, him. In 2013, he co-founded The Fighter and the Kid with a very recently retired UFC heavyweight named Brendan Schaub. And the show turned into a genuine Rogansphere institution. The pitch, more or less, Callen as the older, more seasoned half of the duo. The actual trained stand-up next to the ex-fighter, the adult in the room. The guy who'd been doing comedy since before Schaub owned a suit. Over the last decade or so, his career shifted. Less network TV, way more stand-up and podcasting, which tracks with where plenty of comedians his age end up. Live room, specials, 3-hour conversations with no network standards department looking over anyone's shoulder. Rogan's kept in close through that shift too. Regular sets at the comedy Mothership in Austin, stage time, workshopping new hours, the full still got it, still got range treatment. Last year that turned into a new hour, False Gods, filmed live at the Mothership and put out for anyone to watch on YouTube. Special number 4 for anyone keeping score at home.
Feminism is expensive. That's all I'm trying to say. God bless. God bless. I love that my daughter wants to be an independent scientist, but, you know, there's a part of me that's like, you have your mother's bone structure. Like, marry a multimillionaire.
You already knew that, by the way. You don't need me to announce it like breaking news. It's been out for a while. What's actually more interesting than the special itself is how Callen talks about it on his own show. In the months since it dropped, he's gone on his own podcast more than once and described it in terms that sound less like proud comeback and more like a guy narrating a home renovation that went badly over budget. He's talked about hating pieces of his own material after the fact, and more than once about wanting to walk away from the podcast entirely.
I'm not an anything guy right now. Things aren't going so well.
No, but Brian
It's getting worse.
No.
I'm having a hard time. I'll be honest.
It's all good, Bri.
You know, I've been
Listen to
having a hard
Chen,
time.
man.
Yeah, listen to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to get out of it. Sometimes you get into a situation where you're not sure how to get out of it. But that's okay. Figure it out. You know, it's good. I have friends I can call and talk to.
which is a strange energy for a guy who's supposedly in the middle of a comeback. Usually, when someone's staging a redemption arc, they at least pretend to enjoy it. Callen's redemption arc feels like a proof of life video. Yes, I'm still doing comedy, please don't cancel the tour. So heading into this year, that's roughly where he was standing. Not thriving, not bombing, just hovering. A guy with a real special out, real tour dates on the board, and a podcast with real numbers. Who somehow still talks like the whole operation might fold at any minute. Early February, episode 1162 of The Fighter and the Kid, titled The Epstein Files Are Everywhere. Same episode, by the way, where Callen casually confirms he's on TRT, because nothing about this saga was ever going to stay simple.
Ladies and gentlemen, guess who's on TRT?
Natty or not, Bryan Callen.
Brian's no longer natty, and Daddy's training hard.
Well, no, we don't care about your training. You're TRT. Yeah. Hey, kill me, right? Every time you bring it up. But also, you're on TRT now.
I'm on TRT.
It took how long to convince you?
Long time.
And to be fair to both of them, they didn't invent this topic. The Epstein files had just dumped back into the news cycle again. They do that every few months, and every podcast in America was doing some version of this episode that week. It feels like the fourth or fifth The Files Are Back episode some corner of this podcast ecosystem has recorded this year alone. At this point, it's basically a seasonal event, like an eclipse, except every single time, somebody with a live mic treats it like breaking news they're hearing for the first time. But then it happens. Callen starts talking about the people named in those files, the emails, the flight logs, the whole ecosystem of extremely famous men who apparently just really, really loved going to parties. And instead of the easy, safe, zero risk version of this take, yeah, that's disgusting, moving on, Callen starts explaining. He suggests some big names may not have known what he was actually into.
Wait, hold on. Epstein was a dirtbag, okay? Scumbag. But what if you didn't know?
So post 2008, when you know that the most high profile guy in both New York City,
They didn't know.
come on, they got team. I have a manager who would tell me if someone was a pedophile,
No,
and
no,
I'm
no,
a nobody.
No, but that case was sealed, remember? So most people didn't know until later. That whole thing, remember, the case was sealed. It was thrown out. So we didn't have social media or Google. We didn't have that. You weren't. How were you going to find that out? The dude, all of a sudden he does this little stint, keeps it hush hush. Now he's back in the fold. He's back in the mix.
People at that level talk though.
I don't think anybody found out until 2016. When did he get arrested?
Wait, B, so you don't, you think the majority of people had no idea?
I think most of them didn't have any idea at all.
I think that's
How would they know? How would they know?
Because people talk.
Now, small amount of credit to Brendan Schaub here. You can hear him actively trying to steer the car back onto the road in real time, pushing back, pointing out how much was actually known, how well documented a lot of this is.
I'd like to believe it's very rare still. I'd like to believe.
I don't think so at that elite level.
But from in the 90s, the widest age gaps between men and women in movies and in real life.
How would you say that again?
What was the biggest age
Well, even
gap?
look at Al Pacino now.
Yeah, but at least those women are 30 or 25. That's a different thing. I'm talking about you had movies.
Yeah, Clint
I was 30.
Eastwood. Clint
All
Eastwood
that.
back in the day.
All that. Man.
And Callen just keeps going. For a guy whose entire brand for the last several years has been wise elder statesman of the scene, seen it all, above the noise. This was, somehow, the single least wise thing he could have said out loud, with his own name in the episode title. The internet did exactly what you expect the internet to do in 2026. Respond immediately, mercilessly, Within days, there were clip compilations everywhere. Headlines like, Bryan Callen exposes himself while defending Epstein. Bryan Callen defends the Epstein files. Say it was normal back then. People just screenshotting the moment and captioning it. It was cool back then, like it's a museum plaque. Okay, my actual take, because I think it's more interesting than just piling on. Callen trying to add nuance to a horrifying topic isn't the problem. Nuance is fine, even good. The actual problem, his entire on-air persona for a decade has been, I don't buy the easy narrative. I push back. I ask the follow-up questions. And the one time that instinct actually mattered, the one time a little skepticism should have pointed at the powerful men in the room, he turned it into defense instead. Aimed the whole thing in the wrong direction. He knows how to read a room. He just forgot this one could hear him. So a week later, episode 1163, Callen addresses his Epstein take. And this is where it goes from bad week to genuinely, gloriously cringe. Because instead of the 60-second version, hey, I said that badly, here's what I meant, moving on, you get a long, weirdly emotional response. He walks back the specifics.
To
He's so
me,
powerful, dude. He's so
to
powerful.
me, and I apologize if I was defending. I shouldn't have brought Woody Allen to it. I should have looked into it more. And now that you're telling me that, then
it's bad.
scumbag.
Yeah.
And that's on me. That's on me. So mea culpa.
But he doesn't stop there. Somewhere in the same episode, he pivots hard into how brutal the backlash's been on him personally. People out there just waiting, hoping, actively rooting to watch his career burn down.
So let me just address the amount of I got for my last episode.
But you've had bad takes.
Yeah.
I think that's your worst take.
It wasn't a bad take. Because here's my take. This is what embarrasses me when people are trying to out-hate a pedophile. You don't hate a pedophile more than I do, okay? Nobody does. Nobody's making excuses for that scumbag's behavior. Scumbag. Let me say it if it's not going to. Jeffrey Epstein's a scumbag. Should have been in jail forever in 2008. Nobody disagrees with that. If you do disagree with that, you got problems.
The whole thing completely misunderstood. And that's the actual finishing move. Plenty of people on plenty of podcasts have said dumber things about Epstein's circle and got away with it clean. The problem was the fix. He responded to, I said something bad, by building a whole second episode. 40% apology, 60% main character monologue about how nobody understands him. He turned addressing the take into his own piece of content. And here's why this one lands so much harder than the usual podcast fumble. Podcasters say reckless stuff about Epstein constantly. Most controversies in this space burn hot for a couple of days and vanish. Callen turned it into a 2-part miniseries, and nobody made him do that. Nobody made him spend the follow-up pivoting from, here's what I got wrong, into, here's how unfair the response has been. That's the exact moment a bad week turns into a personality trait. And then there's the age thing, which nobody wants to say out loud. So I will. Callen spent years building this older, wiser, seen it all persona on the show. The guy who's supposed to know better because he's simply been around longer. That persona only works if the wisdom shows up when it actually matters. Instead, at 59 years old, with 4 specials and 3 decades in comedy behind him, his biggest unforced contribution to the most radioactive news story of the year was, maybe they just didn't know. That's Thanksgiving Uncle energy. The guy everyone's gently steering back toward the mashed potatoes. And here's the pattern. If you look at the whole run, every single time Bryan Callen actively tries to manage his own image, a comeback special, a heartfelt statement, a let me explain myself episode, it collapses in almost exactly the same shape. Real grievance, that escalates into something that sounds persecuted, that somehow hands the internet a better, funnier clip than anything his actual stand-ups produced in years.
It's
like
not
for
really
me,
what we do.
People make
you know?
videos on my special and how shitty it is, and I'm like this. I'm like,
You texted me and you go.
I'm like, hey, face. I love how they think I don't say that about myself. Like, oh, are you telling me you don't like my special? Join the fucking club, you loser. I feel the same way, but worse.
He sent you the clip.
No, I didn't
No,
send
he
him
just
that.
texted me. No, he texted me.
I was like, Jesus, I'm just a comic. I'm pretty good at comedy. And people are like, we hate you. But there's so many people. I'm like, die, you piece of. I'm like, really? Really?
Yeah.
First of all, again, I'm way more critical, so you're not saying anything. Go yourself.
Yeah. Go back and listen to almost any recent episode where the topic drifts online criticism, and you'll hear some version of the exact same speech. People are cruel. People are rooting against him. People want to watch his career burn. By May, even guests on other shows were needling him about it to his face. There's a crossover appearance where another comedian goes right after him on exactly this stuff, live, mid-conversation.
Hello? $1 million? Call me when you're serious. Sorry.
What was that for?
It was for me. That's how I start every negotiation.
But I'm saying, what was it negotiating for?
They want me to do an appearance.
For $1 million? What's the appearance?
It's like a big thing in Dubai.
It's become almost its own genre at this point. The "why won't they let me have this" monologue, which is a genuinely strange thing to hear from a guy whose entire original podcast persona 10 years ago was built on not caring even a little bit what anybody thought of him. So here's roughly where Bryan Callen sits. Heading into the back half of 2026, Rogan still got him at the Mothership. The podcast's still putting out episodes. He's still touring behind false gods. On paper, that's a real comeback. In practice, nearly every single time he's picked up the mic to explain himself this year about the special, about the podcast, about Epstein, to remind everyone exactly why they stopped fully trusting him in the first place. There's a version of this story where Callen just quietly does the shows, keeps his opinions on the most toxic topic in America to himself for 6 months, and lets the special and the tour do the talking. That guy has a real comeback. That guy's fine. Instead, we got a guy who looked directly at the single worst possible topic to freelance an opinion on. Freelanced one anyway. Watch it detonate exactly the way anyone could have predicted. And then turn the apology tour into its own extended piece of content about how nobody gets him. Every scene needs a final boss. The guy who's already survived the last fight, who should absolutely know better by now, and who somehow keeps showing up in the final level with a brand new, more elaborate way to lose. Right now, in the Rogansphere, that's Bryan Callen. He's just the guy who keeps volunteering proof of it. And somehow, this still isn't even his worst take of the year. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video, subscribe, and tell me who should be up next.